Hi everyone. Is religion about emotion or is it reason? I thought I might tell you a little bit about it, some thoughts on it. St. Paul tells us that in the end, three things remain: faith, hope, and love. But he adds the greatest of these is love. Why is that? Because when you see the Lord one day, you don't have to have faith and you don't have to hope anymore because you're seeing him. But what you take with you is love. So how shall we love? Most specifically, how shall we love others as ourselves while still loving God above all else? Well, I can feed and house the homeless, and I can visit the sick and the imprisoned, and I can help at church, and of course protect those least protected. I can do all those things which our Lord says are done to him when done for the least among us. You can read about that in Matthew 25:40. But so often, my efforts are more productive in simply donating to those who have an efficient system already in place. Then I run into, well, how do I give to them all? I get like 5 things in the mail every day asking for charity, for funds, for help. And the more I do, it seems like the more lists I get on. Do you ever feel like that? So how do you narrow it down? Who does the greatest good? And what is the greatest love to be shown our brothers and sisters? Well, I prayed about this. And turns out that the most productive thing I can do, well, continuing what I've been doing, of course, not stopping, but is to pray and work for the conversion of us poor sinners. I mean, we need some help, and to pray that the Spirit comes down upon us while strengthening those who are already faithful, while at the same time building up the church in proclaiming the gospel. The gospel means good news. That's Christ's good news. So eternity in heaven is infinitely greater than, say, a full stomach, a home, a good health, or great fortune. So why must one work for God's kingdom in accomplishing this? I mean, you might be asking, well, can't God just do it himself? Well, yeah, but turns out the task has fallen to us. Thanks to the benefits of free will. So we have to do this work, and that's our task. So we either take what has been accomplished through God's covenant with us, or we disregard it at the price of eternity with him. Not too smart. So that is the reason I'm posting this message personally to you, and it's actually no accident that you're watching this right now. So let's open with a bit of raw logic on the matter, from the logic of C.S. Lewis. Now, given today's rapid advances in science and technology, many have come to see faith as merely, well, an emotional impulse that has turned a blind eye to logic and reason. You ever heard of blind faith? Well, some people think that's a bad thing. However, in C.S. Lewis's theological classic, Mere Christianity, maybe you've heard of it, faith is described as a clearly rational virtue. Mr. Lewis describes faith as a virtue that is opposed not to reason, but rather emotion and imagination. Using the example of anesthetics and surgery, C.S. Lewis brilliantly illustrates his point. He says, "My reason is perfectly convinced by good evidence that anesthetics do not smother me, and that properly trained surgeons do not start operating until I am unconscious." He then explains how his imagination and emotions push against his good reason, which, he continues, does not alter the fact that when they have me down on the table and clap their horrible mask over my faith, a mere childish panic begins inside of me. In other words, I lose my faith in anesthetics. Consequently, he goes on, it is not reason that is taking away my faith. On the contrary, what's happening? My faith is based on reason. The battle is between faith and reason on the one side and emotion and imagination on the other. He's imagining himself suffocating or something going wrong or feeling the operation. So Lewis gives another example, and some of you unfortunately may relate to this, but he gives the example of a man and a pretty girl. And this girl is untrustworthy. She can't keep a secret. But enamored with her, emotion and imagination tempt him to lose faith in his good reason, thus compelling him to imagine that, well, perhaps she will be different this time with me. Well, once again, like so many before him unfortunately had discovered, she goes off, makes a fool of him by telling something he knows he should not have told her. And Lewis summarizes, quote, his senses and emotions have destroyed his faith in what he really knows to be true. Now, let's look at this psychological phenomenon, there's a mouthful, with someone who becomes a Christian. There will be a moment, Lewis explains, when there's some bad news, or he or she finds himself in trouble or surrounded by people who challenge him, and suddenly his emotions will rise up and carry out sort of a blitz on his belief. Then, continues Lewis, there is also that moment when he wants a woman, or feels he needs to tell a lie, or sees an opportunity to make a little more money in a manner that is, well, not perfectly fair. At such times, it becomes rather convenient for Christianity not to be true. And once again, Lewis warns, his wishes and desires will carry out a blitz. Such is the nature of sin, as we read in St. Paul's letter to the Romans. And I quote, Romans 8, 6 through 8. The concern of the flesh is death, but the concern of the Spirit is life and peace. For the concern of the flesh is hostility toward God. It does not submit to the law of God, nor can it. And those who are in the flesh cannot please God. Yikes! So Lewis calls faith a virtue, the art of holding on to that which reason has once accepted despite one's shifting moods, and offers some sound practical advice. We must first recognize that moods change. This helps prevent a person from being caught off guard. Second, the central truths of the faith must be always before us. Each of us must meditate upon them, pray, read, and strive to live accordingly. We must be continually reminded of what we believe, because neither this belief nor any other, for that matter, will remain alive in one's mind without being fed. As a matter of fact, if you examine, say, 100 people who had lost their faith in Christianity, Lewis ruminates, how many of them would have turned out to have been reasoned out of it by honest argument? Don't most people just simply drift away, he asks? So, when faith becomes less central to one's life, Jesus warns us that interests and desires, like weeds, quote, sown among the good weed, choke the word and it bears no fruit. You'll find that in Matthew 13:22. So worldly concerns become livelier than matters of faith. And eventually, well, one wakes up and realizes just how far he has come from the faith of his or her youth. Does anybody relate to that? Well, expect this, warns Lewis, if one's faith is not continually nourished and practiced. Otherwise, the light of truth will diminish in one's being until one day, poof, the pilot light goes out, leaving spiritual and intellectual darkness. So in our next segment, we're going to delve into this a little bit. So I hope to see ya. Bye-bye.